The American Revolution, a defining chapter in world history. But before muskets fired and flags waved, before independence was declared, there was tension, frustration, and a growing belief among ordinary colonists that something had gone terribly wrong. Today on History Insights, we'll explore why the American Revolution began, not just the events, but the deeper causes that pushed 13 colonies to defy one of the most powerful empires on Earth. In the mid-1700s, America wasn't America yet. It was a collection of British colonies scattered along the Atlantic coast, loyal, productive, and proud of being part of the British Empire. For decades, life was relatively peaceful. Britain was far away, and local colonial assemblies handled most day-to-day governance. But everything began to change after 1763, the end of the French and Indian War. Britain had won a massive victory over France, gaining control of Canada and expanding its empire. Yet that victory came at a price: war debt, huge war debt, and someone had to pay it. To recover its finances, Britain turned to its American colonies. They introduced new taxes, small at first, but deeply symbolic. The Stamp Act of 1765 required colonists to pay taxes on printed materials, newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. Then came the Townshend Acts, taxing imported goods like glass, tea, and paper. The colonists were furious, not because they hated paying taxes, but because they had no representation in the British Parliament. The phrase that captured their anger spread like wildfire: no taxation without representation. It wasn't just about money, it was about rights. The colonists believed only their local assemblies, elected by them, had the right to tax them. Tensions flared. Merchants boycotted British goods. Ordinary citizens joined secret groups like the Sons of Liberty, who organized protests and sometimes violent resistance. In Boston, resistance turned into confrontation. British troops were stationed in the city to enforce the laws, but that only made things worse. On March 5, 1770, a confrontation between colonists and British soldiers erupted into violence: the Boston Massacre. 5 colonists were killed. It was a shocking moment, and though small in scale, it became powerful propaganda against British rule. The colonies were beginning to see themselves not just as subjects, but as a people with their own identity. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act, allowing the struggling British East India Company to sell tea directly to the colonies, effectively creating a monopoly. The colonists saw it as another example of unfair control. That December, in Boston Harbor, protesters boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. It was a bold, symbolic act, one that echoed around the world. Britain responded with fury. They passed a series of laws known as the Coercive Acts, or as the colonists called them, the Intolerable Acts. These laws closed Boston's port, stripped Massachusetts of self-government, and sent more British troops to enforce order. Instead of intimidating the colonies, Britain's crackdown united them. In 1774, colonial leaders gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. For the first time, delegates from nearly all the colonies met to coordinate a response. They sent petitions to the king, demanded the repeal of the Intolerable Acts, and agreed to stand together if Britain refused. This was more than protest, it was political unity. They were still loyal to the crown, but the idea of American independence was slowly taking root. And when Britain ignored their appeals, the colonists prepared for what they once thought impossible: war. In April 1775, British soldiers marched to the towns of Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons. Local militias confronted them. No one knows who fired the first shot, but that single gunfire, the shot heard round the world, changed history. The American Revolution had begun. Ordinary farmers, shopkeepers, and tradesmen stood against the British Army, not just for taxes or trade, but for something larger: self-government, liberty, and the right to determine their own future. What started as protests over policies had transformed into a full-scale struggle for independence. So, why did the American Revolution begin? It began because people who once called themselves British realized their voices no longer mattered to the empire they served. It began because liberty, that simple, powerful idea, became worth fighting for. In the coming episodes of History Insights, we'll dive deeper into the events that followed, from the first battles to the Declaration of Independence itself. If you found this episode insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time as we explore the Boston Tea Party, the night that changed everything. Until then, I'm your host from History Insights, bringing the past to life, one story at a time.